welcome everybody, and this is for the community as well, all about the passage to eldership today. So I just kind of wanted to start with this quote, and it's become again a favourite quote of mine from Sharon Blackie, who has written a lot of work around rites of passage, particularly for women, but also she talks about eldership as well in her book Haggitude. And this quote says, "Each of us comes to this world called. You choose to be physically embodied in this place, wherever it might be for you. And in these challenging times, you came bearing a unique gift that only you can offer the world. And you didn't come here to play it safe. You came here to risk everything." So for those of you who've been with us from the start, this is where we began really this time last year, which was an introduction to Gail Sheehey's work on rites of passage from her books, Passages and New Passages. And I don't see it as a book now or even work that many people refer to, but I found it incredibly useful, not just from an eldership perspective, but also to kind of give more context to this sense of kind of what life kind of looks like as a map. If only it was as simple as this map, though I have to say, having kind of been introduced to this map in my early 30s. So I kind of wanted to add some other aspects to this particular map. But I think it's a good map in terms of getting a sense of what the different stages of life might look like, and maybe some of the things that happen within each stage of life. And the other thing that Gail Sheehey does, which I think is worth visiting, is she does talk about the different generations and their purpose. So she believes that each generation has a purpose, and it's there therefore to fulfill that purpose. So there's no coincidence that you're born when you are, effectively, in terms of your generation. So her quote is, "With each passage of human growth, we must shed a protective structure. Like a hardy crustacean, we are left exposed and vulnerable, but also yeasty and embryonic again, capable of stretching in ways we hadn't known before." And I know when we talk about transformation, we talk about kind of going into the chrysalis and things being deconstructed. And for me, this is what she's talking about here, this need to deconstruct and disentangle ourselves from each stage of life in order to move effectively to the next stage of life as well. And Gail, she very much talks about the second stage of life rather than eldership. So she talks about the second adulthood. But that for me is stretched, because that goes from the age of 46, as she puts it, or 45, kind of to beyond, if you like, to death. And so what's missing in Gail's work is talking about the role of an elder as well. So what I want to invite you to do is, just using this map, is get 4 different pieces of paper, so separate pieces of paper, and just put them on and map them on the floor for you. On each piece of paper, just write provisional adulthood, first adulthood, second adulthood, and elderhood, and just kind of put them in a timeline, and just stand and look at the timeline that's in front of you. So I'll just invite you to do that now. If you want to go off camera to do that, that's fine as well. I'll just place those pieces of paper. Or if it's easier, because depending on where you are, it might be easier to put it on a desktop as well. If you want to do it that way, then do it that way. Whichever feels right for you. So once you've placed those pieces of paper on the floor, I just invite you to kind of stand and look at the different pieces of paper and just notice what you're aware of in yourself, in your felt sense. This is using Gail's map, Gail Sheehey's map. But what I've done is I've added the other element of elderhood in there. So if you put those pieces of paper on the floor, I would just invite you to notice which one you're first of all drawn to. Which one are you most drawn to? So rather than us go on in a linear way here, let's just notice what you're drawn to first of all. Which one feels like it's calling you the most? And if it feels right, just kind of go and step on that one or focus in on that one. If it's on the tabletop, you may want to touch that piece, that place on the tabletop. So if you put something to represent it on the tabletop or a piece of paper, just put your hand on the piece of paper and notice kind of in your felt sense what you're aware of. And you might want to make a few notes around that. Once you feel you've taken what you need from that place, then notice the next place you'd want to go to. And just follow that movement, wherever that movement wants to take you. You may even be starting to notice where you don't want to go, or feel where it feels less clear. Then the third movement. So what's calling you now? And again, just follow that movement and that noticing. And this kind of may give you a sense of what you might want to explore outside this session as well, and the areas that you feel that you're more curious about or interested in. Also, just be gentle with yourself in terms of noticing maybe those parts of yourself that feel quite caught in a particular space as well. But just take care of yourself in that space. And if it feels too much, then step out. Come back to the present moment. And then finally the last area, whatever that might be for you. So the final fourth one, you may have already visited all of them, and that's fine. But there may be one more that you want to visit just to check out. And when you feel that you're done, if you want to come and sit down, put your camera back on, I'll know that you're back with us. Okay, welcome back, everyone. So just at this point, I think it might be quite useful just to check in on for those who maybe have not seen the map before and never obviously done this particular exercise before. Is there anything anybody would like to share? And there's no pressure to share, so please don't feel under pressure.
Yeah, I'm happy to, Zena. Yeah, I mean, I was dwelling in the elder space and scribbling quite a lot of things around. I suppose linking it back on the one hand to you know the poem, the wastelands, and that sense of loss and confusion and all of that. But then I was thinking, that's actually the phase before the kind of everything sort of doesn't make sense anymore, or some things don't make sense, or whatever it is, and then out of that is action, and that's a stepping into elderhood. But then that's not a thing. It's not suddenly one day I'm confused and the next day I'm an elder. It feels more for me like a sense of transition, as you mentioned earlier. And I suppose I summarize it by kind of whatever successes and failures I've had in my life. I don't kind of look back and go, oh, I wish I had my youth again. I wish I could do that again, because my suspicion is that actually, if I don't look at T.S. Eliot's shadows behind and in front, well, guess what? I'm going to repeat the same sort of stuff again and again. But actually, from a place of the elder, I'm kind of, it's a different perspective. It is absolutely about kind of feeling some sadness, loss, but it's also about joy, for me anyway. That's my experience. So yeah, and therefore more of an exploration of life beginning again. If any of that makes sense.
It does, it doesn't. And it's interesting, isn't it? I'm kind of conscious that we put these pieces of paper down for these ages, but there's these gaps in between as well, isn't there? There's the spaces in between the ages, which are those thresholds, and we just don't recognise those thresholds.
No. Nobody ringing the bell, sort of going, "This is it, time to change."
I remember kind of when I was younger, it was all about being 40, life begins at 40 and all those kind of sayings.
Yeah.
And that kind of that moment where, you cross that threshold and you of the age, as in your birthday, and you're waiting for whatever that might look like and be like. And it's like, no, that you're actually on the threshold here. You're not actually in your 40s. So, yeah. I think there's kind of a lack of recognition of those spaces in between as well. So thank you for that. And I know, Simon, one of the things that you said that, I think we might have said it in the podcast or in our many, many conversations, that one of the things that you experience in your eldership and your stepping into this elder space is beauty.
Yeah. I'm guessing that's partly because a sense of, to some degree, kind of slowing down and being a bit more awake, hopefully, or choosing to be awake, and then and with that, definitely, as in that song, Moby's song, you look around and plenty of reasons to despair and feel very deeply challenged and moved by what's going on, but actually still being able to appreciate that, there's this mixture of, everything in the life that I see at the moment, and I can walk down the street and it's ugly and jangled, or I can walk down the street and notice the buds of spring coming out and there's a flower growing in between the cracks, and I don't know, yeah, just like observing things. And perhaps it's partly a slowing down in order to observe those things rather than kind of rushing by, because the earlier stages, even my second adulthood, I'm still in conquer all and drive forward and and don't take prisoners, and actually my wife said an interesting thing about that traveling at that kind of speed in my corporate life would be like looking and bumping into something and going, yeah, I'll come back to you, I haven't got time, I've got to keep moving, but you never come back, you never quite, and so there's all this sort of trail of things that behind you. But beauty for me, yeah, absolutely, really, really important in the sense of just a joy, actually, joy in each moment.
Thank you. Thanks, Simon. Anybody else? Any thoughts or comments? Aye. So how do we say your name? Is it Agnieszka? Agnieszka?
Yes, great.
Oh.
Agnieszka, yes. The SZ is like, wash your hands. Yes, so I just put some words that characterize the way I felt, I think, in the different places. And I'm noticing how I'm so individualistic, I'm so autonomous, so self-obsessed, and that kind of tightness just becomes looser and looser and looser as I come of age, 46, maybe 7 now. Yeah, don't know how old I am. And then second adulthood, it's me towards others, and elderhood towards others. There isn't even a me in elderhood, which is such a welcome relief.
Yeah, it's not about me anymore.
It's not about you. Oh my God. So yeah, that's what I'm noticing. And I've always said this to myself, that I think that I'm 65. I've always felt 65 for some reason. So I feel like I'm kind of walking towards myself at the same time. So it's a very paradoxical stance somehow, that within me I feel a deep sense of peace about being. I have 65 in me. So it's a sort of a becoming myself, and at the same time abandoning, like not abandoning, but it's like it's not about me at the same time.
And what I'm aware of when you say that, Agnieszka, is I wonder whether, the age, this kind of being drawn to being 65 or feeling 65, I wonder if that is an age, or is that whatever you've attached to that age of 65? So I wonder whether that might be wisdom. Is that wisdom? Is that
there is some kind of, yes, there is some kind of a sense of an imagining of that sense, but I feel very I like that. It's not a threatening idea. There is a continuous unfolding towards wisdom that I care about, and that 65 feels like a very embodied, wrinkly. I'm drawn to that. It doesn't feel like a loss of youth so much. It's coming towards me.
Yeah. Because I think the important thing to say about eldership is it isn't an age-specific thing. So it's to do with a function within society, within humanity. And so we can feel the call to eldership at any point in some ways in our lives. So I think that's why I struggle with it being on a linear path and it being attached to an age, when actually in my research and in my experience, it's not that. But I wonder whether there's some part of us won't allow ourselves, for instance, to be wise until we get to a certain age that society has dictated we can be wise or we can express wisdom, because certainly, you know, children are full of wisdom if we listen. It isn't an age. Wisdom is you know, is within us. It's in our kind of our soul code, and it may also be the fact that we have come into this world very connected to the universal wisdom as well. So not just from our life experience and our soul, but also from the universe as well, being able to tune into the wisdom of the universe. So Pam's saying here, I feel so much wisdom from our children. Yes, me too. Very much. If we would only be listening and tuning in more as older people. And I think that's one of the things as well, as a myth of being old as well, is that sense that somehow we're bigger than the children, or bigger than other people, and that's not eldership either. It's being much more tuned into the universal wisdom and our own soul wisdom as well. And Heike has now left us, so just to acknowledge that. Yeah. So I would encourage you to be 65. Be 65. I wonder what that might be like, to actually give yourself permission to be 65 now as well, whatever that might mean.
Yeah, I don't even have to give myself permission. It's very connected. I think it's almost like parts of the tree, that all those things are in us from the beginning and forever. There is a young part, there's that part, they're kind of like the tree that grows, that somehow I'm connected to the whole passage. That's how it kind of lives in me. That it's not transitioning from one to another. It's maybe having more access to them at a different time in life.
Yeah, that's lovely. Anybody else want to say anything from your experience?
Yeah, I can say anything. Hello. I first stepped into the phase I am in, and I can tell you that 67 is even better than 65. In terms of yeah, so if we acknowledge that also this phase is a phase of growth and development and much more freedom, and so what's for me in that phase especially is that you can look back, and also you can look forward, or you can it feels like you can see the whole. Whereas when I then stepped into the phases before, it was interesting that these phases were, yeah, the youngest phase was just sports. I saw just sports things on my in my room, And I was reminded of, yeah, I did a lot in that age, and the 2 phases between was kind of lots of work, or that the spiritual path came along. So that this was added in the second adulthood phase. So it was really a nice exercise in terms just linking everything that I saw from stepping into these phases around me and what I recognized. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, let me just go back to the slides just to kind of complete the conversation. Let me just so can everybody see this slide? Yeah. So this was my attempt at trying to add something into the mix here in terms of this, because I really struggle with this linear drawing of life around age, to be honest. And although I do think kind of stages of life and passages of life, I very much agree with. But this was my kind of attempt to express that it's more like a fractal in my understanding of it. So it's kind of it's a pattern, and it's about exploring more deeply the pattern. And instead of kind of growing up, we're growing down. So it's like our roots are going deeper into the ground. Rather, I think we know when we talk about growing up, but we don't talk about growing down. So the roots are going much more deeper. And often, when do we know that we're maybe on a threshold of our second adulthood, or forget the age thing, but when do we actually know it? Because it can actually come sooner. And that's kind of an experience of knowing that we're somehow in this concept of the wasteland, which is a mythical space as much as it is a literal space, where you feel suddenly disconnected from what you're doing. You start to notice that maybe there's work that you're doing that you don't feel connected to, excuse me, relationships that you feel may have run their course and maybe coming to an end as well, whether that's intimate relationships or friendships or even work relationships. But it's where you start to notice that I'm just going through the motions here, and actually it starts to feel meaningless. Or it could even be a crisis that's more like an inner crisis, but you may also have experiences of an actual crisis in terms of parents dying, and that could happen when you're younger. It doesn't necessarily happen when you're older, or parents about to die, or the loss of someone very, very close. Or it could be kind of a financial situation that you've been in where you've hit hardship. So there's many different reasons that could create a midlife crisis. And we call it a midlife crisis, but again, that crisis can happen at any time in your life, which can then move you, maybe even speed you up into a second adulthood. In the second adulthood, it's about reinventing life. And this is what we're really not encouraged to do in the West, certainly in the Western world. We're not encouraged to reinvent life. We might be encouraged to reinvent ourselves, like a new image or so on, but not actually looking at your whole life and thinking about, am I following my soul's code? So in that space, it's about breaking patterns and awakening. And when I'm talking about a spiritual awakening, I'm not talking about something woo-woo here. It's almost like that sense of longing for something more meaningful and much more deep. And that's why I like Carl Jung's quote, "We cannot live the afternoon of life according to the programming of life's morning." So it's about finding our purpose and meaning. But how do we know when we're kind of stepping and maybe approaching the threshold of our elderhood? And Mike has already mentioned it here, is that emotional and social liberation. And Simon's mentioned about appreciating beauty. So there's something about where we suddenly don't feel as entangled in the social realm. And although there's an element of fear, there's this fear of getting old because we become invisible, there's also real liberation in that invisibility. And so it's kind of the blessing in the burden, if you like. And we often don't recognize there is that space. And it's a beautiful space. So that's something that I kind of wanted to bring in, because although Gail Sheehey talks about it in the book, it's very much based on research into having conversations with people, and it doesn't necessarily go into anything much deeper than that. But for me, a lot of the work around mythology and symbolism and so on is where the guidance is in those thresholds from the wasteland to the second adulthood and to the elderhood. So this is kind of my quote for this, which is: the passage to elderhood is entered through the gateway of the second adulthood. So we don't get to elderhood until we have a much deeper understanding of the patterns and have done some work on releasing some of those patterns. And for me, it's not just kind of the patterns in our own personality, for instance, it's in our ancestral patterns as well, which is where the systemic realm is really, really important to be working, not just in the physical realm or in the psychological realm. It is much deeper than that. If we attempt to step into or even feel that we're approaching elderhood without really understanding our ancestral patterning, it will pull us back again. And so this is where it's important to kind of recognize the work that has to be done in the second adulthood stage. So the guardian at this gate, and this guardian, if you like, think of this as a mythological creature, because we often talk about them as mythological creatures, but a guardian is somebody who's holding the gate. It's like the gatekeeper, and is checking, are you ready to cross the threshold? And they also point the way to the dweller on the threshold, which are those who show us those hidden and those unconscious patterns that will need to be broken in order to fulfill our soul's purpose, and therefore lay the foundations for our own eldership niche, as in what are we born to do, and what is our contribution to our community and to our loved ones, or even bigger than that, if you like, even to the world. So these are some of the things that happens at these gateways, and sometimes we can get stuck with these guardians, because they will not let us pass through until we've actually learned whatever it is we need to learn in order to gain the resources we need for that next stage. And so these guardians are very important, and those guardians may come up in our own self-sabotage patterns, or they may actually come up in literally people or events in life that kind of stop us in our tracks, and entanglements we might be in that we need to look at more deeply in order to disentangle. So the other thing I just wanted to mention is there's a lovely lady in America called Dr. Catherine Svella. She has a podcast which is very worth listening to, and I'll link it in the newsletter this week, about a podcast called mythicmojo.com. And she says that one of the difficult things, once we've been through a crisis and when we've been through those deeper parts of ourselves, is we then find that we've got gifts to bring to the world, but we often can't cross the threshold back into the ordinary world, the known world, if you like, reconnecting back to our old life. And that's often where then people get stuck, because they then don't know how to bring what they've been given or they've learned in this gift of the crisis that they're in. But that then the person is, or we are transformed. And so with so much effort, we've been changed. And now changed. So you're no longer like everyone else in some important way. So there's something that differentiates you. And this, for lots of people, presents a lot of difficulties, because when we try and go back into the world that we've just come out of, we'll often meet huge resistance. So actually bringing the boon back, the gift back to the world, is just a bigger challenge as the initial calling in the first place, to actually go into those deeper places, to look at those patterns. But there's not much reference to that. And certainly in The Hero's Journey, Joseph Campbell's work, there's a bit of a dismissiveness about returning with the boon. But certainly from my experience, that's been the biggest challenge for the people that I've worked with, is how do I now go back to my ordinary life, the ordinary world, and bring this? I don't even know how to talk about it. So that, again, is a passage in itself. So I'll just throw this back open to you. Any reflections on those thoughts? I'm interested to hear.
I'll go, Zena. That last thing for myself personally, the gatekeeper. For myself at the minute, personally, there's a battle with me and my gatekeeper, because the gate's closed and I want to go through the gate, but there's things that I've got to kind of learn, and old patterns, behaviours. So there's kind of a midlife crises going on my end, which I thought I'd start being like behaving outrageously, but it's inner work. That's my midlife crisis, and you can't necessarily see that. So that for me really spoke, the gatekeeper, because I kind of just want to push this gatekeeper out of the way so that I can move on to the next stage. But that's not happening, and I'm grateful that that's not happening. But it's yeah, I've definitely hit midlife at 49, definitely. So that was really, really helpful, and like I say, the gatekeeper it really stuck with me on the newsletter over the weekend as well. So just to go over that again today is very helpful, because I've been working with it all week, breaking the cycle, etc. So yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and those things can show up as relationships, as people, you know, that you know, it is an internal, sometimes can be an internal kind of contract that has to be broken. You know, you know, and a contract for me, when I was kind of at the threshold of like 49, 50, was thinking my automatic position in my family system was, okay, then I'll be the wrong one. I'll just, you know, I'll let you be right and I'll just be wrong. And then suddenly I realized that maybe I have to switch that contract. I have to let go of that contract and say, well, you know, it's not about being right or wrong, but, you know, I'm happy with the decision I'm going to make, or I'm going to do something that may appear wrong, but it feels right. And that, you know, but actually that, I'm saying that so flippantly, that was a dark night of the soul, a real dark night of the soul, and went on for a quite long time, in terms of being able to cross that threshold and deal with the terrifying feeling of what would happen, because I'd never done that before. You know, so what would actually happen? And it did mean that some people in my life disappeared, some relationships disappeared, and that's sometimes a sacrifice that has to be made at each stage and those thresholds. So thank you. Thanks for bringing that as well. Anybody else? Any final closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'll go. I can relate to what everybody's said. I agree. I can totally relate to what Siobhan's just said about the gatekeeper not letting you through. I do feel like there's a great big gatekeeper not letting me through, and he's got a great big stick and he's going to hit me on the head with it if I try and I also agree with what Simon was saying before about when you look back. I mean, it would be great to go back and be your younger self with your 65-year-old head on, because you wouldn't. I just know if I look back, I'd make all the cock-ups I've made before. And I'd probably make some worse ones as well, actually. I've been quite lucky. So I'm stuck at the moment in the second adulthood, looking forward towards the eldership, but looking back, thinking I'm glad that's behind me. But I've still got a few things to learn yet before I can progress to get past that man with a big stick. He's going to give me a belt if I try and get past him. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. It's so,
I don't know why he's evoking so much laughter. I mean, he's talking about a gatekeeper with a stick, and we're all laughing here.
It's more like a staff. It's got a great big brass head on it. It's gonna...
You need to draw it. You need to draw. It's always a good idea to draw what this guardian looks like. This guardian at the gate.
I've gone straight to Gandalf with his stick down, thou shalt not pass, or whatever he said.
Just like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody, I mean, I'm showing my age now. Does anybody remember Monkey?
Yes.
TV program.
With his staff of power.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's very symbolic. And it is, I really encourage people to work with it because it's so symbolic and mythological, that threshold. So it's really useful to work with images and stories, so sometimes finding films that really speak to you on that threshold can be really useful. So I mean, one that springs to my mind that I absolutely love and really resonated with me, and I know it resonated with a few more here because I've had this conversation with some of you before, is the film Wild Rose. If anybody's so that's a younger woman's rite of passage into adulthood, but it's a really, for me, it's a really good film around the fact that she really wanted to express herself creatively, but she'd got really kind of caught in the old family system. So that was a brilliant film for that. So kind of finding films as well that resonate around certain thresholds as well. And I'm starting to gather some of these films, so I will put some of them out on the newsletters as well so that people can watch them, because there's some brilliant films of rites of passage. For me, one of the favourites of elderhood is Nomadland. Has everybody seen Nomadland? Okay, I'll put that in on the newsletter on Sunday. So that's a great one. Another one, which is a lighter one, is The Intern, if anybody's seen that one, on elderhood. And the other one is All About Schmidt with Jack Nicholson. Is a really good film for elderhood as well, and retirement. So there's some brilliant films, and I think they're coming more and more, and I'm still kind of searching and finding them as well. So I'll and encourage you, if anybody sees any of them they really feel speaks to you, just please do send them to me, because I am kind of collating these for the community as well, so we can start sharing some of these films as well. Okay, on that note, I'm just conscious that we're running slightly over time. So please do, let me know anything that you want to talk about on these sessions. If there's any ideas that you want to kind of come up with, please do share them as well. And any thoughts on the newsletters, by all means, please share back with me as well. I'm very fortunate that people do talk to me in the community, which is helping, because it doesn't, I feel like it is a community, and I am interested in what other people's view of eldership is, and your own experiences of it as well. So I want it to be a really rich community. So there'll be lots of sharing as well. So thank you so much for all your contributions today. It's so delightful to see you all, and a real pleasure. And thank you so much for the new people who are here as well. It's great to have you with us, and I look forward to seeing you again. Take care. Bye-bye.